Blog Talk Radio.
Carol the Coach. Sex, love, and relationships. We talk about it here.
Carol the Coach. Compassion with contemporary relevance.
I am a psychotherapist. I can be your personal life coach, and I can help you with your issues. There are no problems too small or too big. You can talk about anything.
Speaker, columnist, radio TV host, and commentator. Carol the Coach brings messages of wellness and empowerment within reach of everyday people every day.
Almost 5 years ago, I lost my soulmate in an accident. He was killed in a plane crash. Life just, for me, has seemed to stop.
There are groups all over the city. I teach one. It is a specific way to start thinking so that you shift how you see the world, which then shifts your energy, and then you feel better and you actually see things differently.
Carol the Coach. Always available, too, at carolthecoach.com.
Now, I've got Russell on the line.
I'm 47 years old. I'm a truck driver. I'm married. I have a wife in San Francisco.
Okay.
I haven't been home in 6 months. My thing is, I don't know if I have a sex addiction or what the problem is. Why do I want what I can't have? And as soon as I can have it, I don't want it anymore.
You're right on target when you say, I don't know if I have a sexual addiction. Well, guess what? Yes, you do. And you know what? That's my specialty, Russell. So you're at the right place. Continue.
I meet women online, and I'm in a different part of the country. I travel all 48 states, so I love sex.
I hear self-esteem issues. You never felt good enough, and you didn't feel like you were getting what you should have then, and you're reenacting that now. Do you want to change that about yourself?
You get what you need.
I got an interesting email this week. He says, thank you for taking my email in question. My girlfriend and I listen to you on the radio, and she respects your opinion as I do. So here's the question. I've been separated for 9 months. I'm working on a divorce. Is it okay to date? I believe it is. But she's not comfortable with being around people who know my divorce is not final. Can you help? He kind of answered it when he said if she's not comfortable, it's not a good gig. And Pat,
that is exactly right. If she isn't comfortable, then he needs to look at what's going on. I mean, come on now. If you haven't closed a chapter, then you really shouldn't start a new one. And what did he do? He started a new one before he closed it at all, and that's why she's not comfortable with it. You know, I try to be non-judgmental, but I really do believe that it's important to have boundaries and to determine what you need to do to end something before you start something else. Hi, I'm Carol Jurgensen-Sheets, a.k.a. Carol the Coach, and I am delighted to be with you tonight. It's been one of those weekends where, well, actually, it was an unusual weekend. I'm leaning into retirement. What does that mean? Oh, it means I'm going from about 55 clients to hopefully 30. Have I lessened my clientele this week? Well, no. But what I have done is that I have shortened my work week. I am officially working Monday through Thursday. And wow, I had the opportunity to not have any clients this weekend. Now, I worked on a lot of things. I've got some tops going on right now. I cannot tell a soul. Well, I'll give you a few hints. One thing is that I'm making a video. I'm making a cartoon on the science of partner betrayal. And I'm working with a very talented man, and we are almost done with this, and it's just going to be fabulous. So that's one thing I'm doing. The other thing is that I have decided that I am going to be the empathy czar of the world. I want to teach empathy to everyone. And to do that, I need clinicians and coaches everywhere to learn some of these empathy skills so that they can teach their clients, teach their coworkers and make a difference in the world. That's what we need right now. In this world, we need empathy. So that's one thing I'm doing. Super excited about that. And then I'm taking a mindfulness course this weekend with the great Darren Ford. And one of the things that I believe is that mindfulness can really calm down an addicted brain. And I also believe that mindfulness can calm down an activated brain. Now, one might say activated, what do you mean? Well, activated as in if you have an addiction and you're triggered and you've got a lot of urges and cravings, you need to calm that brain down. It's the opposite of activating the dopamine center in the brain, the reward center. But what I also believe is that if you're a partner, you need to figure out how to feel safe and stable, and that means coming back into the window of tolerance. And so I'm hoping that this mindfulness course that I'm going to be taking will certify me into, with a lot of extra hours, a lot of extra money, and a lot of extra time, I hope that I can really teach mindfulness in a way that people enjoy as opposed to going, I can't meditate. That's what I'm hoping for. And I'm hoping that I can practice with you. I really, really want to do that. And now I am super jazzed because I just got my copies of Unleashing Your Power, Moving Beyond Partner Betrayal. You know, you might have heard me say this on another podcast, but truly, this thing came out in January 1st. And then it got pulled. And I was so mad because I had clients and colleagues that were buying it left and right and showing me that it had come to their home and they were excited. They took pictures. And then all of a sudden it said pre-orders only. And I'm like, how can something be out and then not be out? Well, that's the beauty of book publishing. Out now. It's official. And I hope you'll take a look at it. You can look at it at Amazon.com. If you have an activated husband or wife, you can certainly go to Amazon and get Unleashing Your Power, Moving Beyond Partner Betrayal. And if you want a 20% discount, go to Sano Press. Okay, now the last thing that I'm going to talk to you about, which I'm very excited about, is that I am doing a Help Her Heal 12-week group series. And I got to say, I got to do it for men because what I know to be true is that partners get very concerned if their husbands are in with other female sex addicts. So this one's going to be for men. And 12 Tuesdays, it starts next Tuesday. And every week we're going to go over a chapter in the book. We're going to talk about examples. And since I've been doing this for a couple of years now, I'm going to talk to you about every conceivable thing that can go wrong and every conceivable thing that could go right. And if you're interested in signing up for that group, I am limiting it, so you can contact me at carolthecoach.com. And I would love to get you into the group and take you on a 12-week journey and hopefully teach you empathy, right? That's what I said I want to do. I'm getting such a kick out of it. I've been branded as the relationship whisperer. That's kind of hard to say. So the relationship whisperer is when you can work with couples that are very, very activated and calm them down and bring them into safety and stabilization, and actually not look at the issues they present, but instead look at the issues underneath the issues so that we can help him or her heal as quickly as possible. You can't rush this stuff. There's no doubt about it. But when you know what you're doing, you can expedite the course. And that's what I am all about, expediting the course. I love it, and that's why I want to do it. I want to help couples heal. You know, when I was younger, one of the best ways to make money was to be a mediator. And psychotherapists could mediate instead of couples that were divorcing or couldn't get along, instead of them going through the court and having to deal with attorneys. And interestingly enough, I said there is no way in Hades I will ever do that. That is conflictual. That's ugly. People are fighting. They're not getting along. They're name-calling. They're hurt. It's tragic. I would never do that. And now look at me. I have picked what I believe to be the hardest situation to remedy, and that is a couple that wants to stay together after sexual betrayal. Now, if you're a single guy and you don't have a partner and you've got sex addiction, well, I want to say that we know that you've got a lot to deal with, because not only are you working on making your life more meaningful, and you want better self-esteem, and, you know, you're tired of self-loathing, and you're tired of being in this dark world that nobody knows but you, right? And really, you don't have anybody to help hold you accountable. You have to do it yourself. Well, that can be really, really hard. And my hat's off to you. But that's when you use a group to help hold you accountable. That's when you decide what principles are the most important to you. It was so funny because I was talking to a client today that has 96 clean days. And I said, what are you doing that has afforded you for the first time in your life 96 clean days? And he said, it is so weird, Carol. I am getting up at 5:30 every morning. I'm reading the Green Book, Sex Addicts Anonymous, and then I'm reading some Bible verses. And then I'm documenting all the things that I'm supposed to do to have a really recovery, steadfast life. And he showed me everything he was doing and how he documented it. And I told him, I said, you know, we've known for a long time, if you want to lose weight, the number one way to do that is to write down what you put in your mouth. It sounds so simple, but people don't want to do that. Boring, it's monotonous. It's, you know, you say, oh, I'll catch that tonight, and then you don't do it that night, and then you say, I'll catch it in the morning, and then your morning gets ahead of you. And before you know it, you're 3 or 4 days behind. And if you're 3 or 4 days behind, you're not accurate anymore. So I love the fact that he is doing his very best to document every positive change that he's making. If he's walking, he's writing it down. If he's working out, he's writing it down. If he's reading the Bible, he's writing it down. If he's saving money, he's writing it down. I mean, this guy is documenting his life. And someday he'll be able to look at that and he'll be proud of the fact that not only did he change his life, but that he used a very structured format to prove to himself that he was following his recovery tools. Now tonight, I'm going to be interviewing a woman who wrote an incredible memoir of traumatic psychological abduction and sexual exploitation. And she's going to be sharing her life and what it meant to be under the spell of somebody in a much more powerful position than she. And she's going to talk about a college student, Carrie Tansey, who went through this horrible ordeal. And actually, she was able to reclaim her power and right some of the wrongs. And she used reframing. She was able to look at her life and find purpose in it and grow stronger from it and no longer be defined by that exploitation. So I am really excited to be interviewing her because obviously there is quite a past here, and her writing is absolutely incredible. It's riveting. It makes you want to just keep reading and reading and reading. So I am actually going to be welcoming Carrie to the show tonight. She's going to be coming on and talking about her memoir. Again, it's called Seduced into Darkness, Transcending My Psychiatrist Sexual Abuse. And Carrie, welcome to Sex Help with Carol the Coach.
Hi, Carol. Thank you for having me on.
Hello, boy.
Can you okay?
I sure can. Can you hear me okay?
Great. I sure can. We're good.
Excellent. Well, you know, I obviously had found out about this book, and, you know, we deal with exploitation on this show and on so many levels. And this is your memoir, Seduced into Darkness, Transcending My Psychiatrist Sexual Abuse. And so I want to ask you, what compelled you to write your story, and why now? Especially with the Me Too movement. Why now?
Absolutely. Well, it actually I started writing it way before the Me Too movement. This happened back in the early 80s when I was a college student. And it's been a 40-year process to get to the point where I was actually able to publish it, and it was released March the 1st, and of course then the whole world shut down March the 15th this last year. So it was kind of anticlimactic, but it also gave me more time to just sort of sit with it, what it was like to put this memoir out there. So it was a 40-year process from the time it happened to when it was actually published, and I wrote on and off for years. And then got my daughter into college, didn't really want to put it out there when she was younger and at home, and I wasn't really ready for it. And then it all came about, and of course all of this, as I got my contract with the publisher, you know, Harvey Weinstein was being sentenced, and the Jeffrey Epstein scandal came out, and I mean, certainly does seem like it's the time now to be hearing more about these stories, what exactly happens in this kind of exploitive relationship, how we can prevent them, you know, what needs to happen for victim and also perpetrator. Very often people just get their wrists slapped, as my doctor did, and then he went on to do it again after my trial and whatnot. So it was not handled well back in the 80s. I don't know that it's really being handled that much better now. Although I do know that it's a crime in about half of the states, and the Attorney General gets involved as soon as there's a complaint of sexual exploitation with medical providers or mental health providers.
Well, yes, and you were so brave to take this on. So let me ask you, tell us about why you included the myth as a concept and context for your story, because you have a specific myth that really is metaphoric for what you went through.
Absolutely. And I think, I'll say that I think it's an important archetype for anyone who is dealing with an underworld journey. as many partners are. I work with partners and sex addicts now as a professional, and I certainly see the telltale signs of the feeling of being yanked into the underworld. And so I put my story in the context of the myth of Persephone, and she's the goddess of spring and queen of the underworld. And she is the young, innocent maiden daughter of Zeus and Demeter, who is abducted, seized by her uncle Hades, and brought down into his underworld lair. She's raped, held hostage in the underworld, and then he makes her his queen. And long story short, it's all metaphor for someone who goes through a rupturing, dark, traumatic experience, but also has a transformative opportunity to become a wise person. And so she comes out, she's rescued, and then she then becomes goddess of spring too, which really signifies the renewal that is possible for anyone going through a dark journey. I mean, it takes work. It takes a lot of work. So not that it's an easy thing, but putting my story in the context of Persephone gave me great comfort to tap into a universal theme that has happened, through the millennium. And
so you call
including
that
the
Persephone myth, right?
Yes, the myth of Persephone. Yep.
Okay, so now, obviously, you went through this horrible ordeal, and that goddess, if you will, represents the strength it took for you to even work through this issue. And so people who are listening to the show may say, okay, we're going to be talking about sexual exploitation, but truly you have a certification that allows you to work with sex addicts and partners of sex addicts. So did that come out of your experience with the psychiatrist?
Well, it's a great question. It's very interesting because just as synchronicities can happen in your life, I found myself being asked to come back to work at a treatment center here in Santa Fe. It's called the Life Healing Center. I'm in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I had worked there in the 90s as a trauma therapist, had done my internship there in art therapy, and then left and did other things and was asked to come back and be an art therapist again in 2011. And I wind up on the campus and I'm like, what is all this stuff about sex addiction? Because back in the 90s when I worked there, it wasn't being talked about. We looked at repetition compulsion, based on sexual trauma, but there was no languaging for addiction around sexuality. Well, when I came back to the same facility in 2011 to once again work as an art therapist, I was kind of stunned by how much the focus was of the program on this issue. And so they wound up sending me for CSAT training, and also I was in the first class of APSATs, the association that works with the traumatized partner, or trains therapists that work with the traumatized partners and couples. And so it was only after I had gone through the trainings and I was working with people and I was seeing this imagery that I was like, holy cow, I relate to this journey. And I started thinking again about my doctor and his behaviors and the fact that he did it again. And I was like, oh my goodness, I think he was a sex addict, or he certainly had sexually compulsive disorder that made him betray his ethics and put himself in a position of great vulnerability, as well, obviously, as his clients. But sadly, when I took him before the ethics committee, after I had actually won 2 suits against him, I filed a complaint. They just slapped his wrist. He had supervision for 6 months, and he went back right at it. Within a couple of years, he was already involved with another client. So I think the system failed him in terms of looking at the degree of his own illness, really, that if he could have been rehabilitated, perhaps he would not have done it again, or he may have been forced to leave the profession. I think we have a lot more sophistication now, but it still doesn't always happen that people hold such a perpetrator responsible, because it's really a devastating betrayal of trust, and there's a real trauma bond there, so many people never speak out.
Well, absolutely. So can you tell us a little bit about how he seduced you, and then what infractions occurred as a result, and then how you came to move out of that web and empower yourself to stand up for the exploitation and say no more?
Okay. Well, I was 21, or I had just turned 21, and I was in the period of about 3 months before seeing him. I was having symptoms of, I had been on antibiotics for 4 years and had a complete immune system breakdown. This is when young women were given tetracycline like candy back in the 70s and 80s for acne, right? Not knowing what happens to your gut. And so I was having a lot of immune system problems, couldn't focus in college. I was very career oriented, but didn't have, my brain wasn't working well. And then I started having panic attacks. So my folks set me up with a couple of doctors back in the D.C. area, which is where I'm from, Frederick, Maryland, for consultations. And we decided upon him because he was Georgetown educated, highly recommended, very experienced, and started and left college in Virginia to go and see him. And we definitely had a nice connection. I was going through a lot of kind of a spiritual awakening. I was attending these prayer services, and I was feeling like for the first time I was actually really connecting with God, but at the same time that I was very, very depressed. So I was kind of swinging up and down between, oh, my God, there is purpose, there is a God, there's meaning, and oh, my God, I'm so depressed that I want to get out of bed. And so he started seeing me 3 times a week. He was Freudian trained. You know, very early on, he was asking a lot of questions about my sexuality, which now I look back and go, oh my gosh, they were so intrusive and inappropriate from the beginning. But I knew he was a Freudian trained therapist, and I didn't know what therapy was. You know, I was a college kid, right? So I was answering the questions, and he started to slowly kind of, whittle down my boundaries and make it seem like, you know, all my problems were due to this uptight religious family I came from, and my parents were really square. And, you know, he was just like, you know, it was like basically trying to suggest that a lot of my problems were that I was sexually uptight, which is not what I went in there for. I went in there for panic attacks. I had boyfriends, normal relationships. I had regretted that I hadn't found my true partner yet. But again, I think most normal therapists would say, you're 21. You need to discover yourself before you're ready, right? No, but he spun everything into this pathological lens about, oh, yes, this dynamic and that dynamic, and slowly really whittled down my trust in my relationships and my family because, of course, after all, why would I be feeling so bad if it had to be someone else's fault, right? You know, it was like this was this seduction. And then he I would say what he did is he turned me against myself and my own instincts and, wanted to know more about my spiritual path, and he wanted me to invite him to one of the events I went to. So there was all this kind of unfolding of this sort of spiritual component. He started telling me in session about how he had prayed and this light appeared and he had thought of me and he wanted to know more about what I was experiencing. And all of this made me feel very special, right? Like, oh my gosh, my doctor is really interested in what I'm experiencing. And I wanted to kind of, in my naivete, I wanted to heal the split that I saw between psychology and religion and kind of have this, this spiritual experience that my doctor's now understanding. And by this time I had gotten so isolated. I had left college. All my friends in my hometown were all off at college. So I was very alone, going back to live in my family home, which was very depressing at 21. I'd been a great student and doing well in life, and then it was like nothing was working. So I was, very vulnerable to his questioning my truth. So I started not trusting myself or my instincts. And and there was an event where he invited me, and I thought I was going to go horseback riding and have this lovely weekend with him and his daughter, and before I know it, he's giving me drugs and something in alcohol, and I blacked out and I couldn't remember the rest of the weekend. So once that happened, I was so traumatized, and I had to so much make it right and get my doctor back, the one that I had trusted in, that I just started slowly compartmentalizing and just denying what my body was saying. I was so confused and ashamed, just deeply ashamed, and I was afraid he would lose his license. I mean, he would tell me that. If anybody found out, he could lose his license. So I had this huge weight on me that I couldn't tell anybody else what was happening. So in that, I just got more and more attached to him, and I was declining more and more as the weeks went on, or months, So, yeah. But anyway, long story short, yeah. Go ahead.
I would think
that, in some ways, Carrie, this was an auto-exacerbating problem because obviously you went to him for help. He pathologized you for issues that were not even the reason you came to him. You started to be dependent on him and his notoriety, his attention, probably even his affection. And then he exploited you more. And then that made you feel worse about yourself and yet more special. I mean, truly, sexual abuse victims say, I loved how much attention I got from this person. Yes. I mean, that's part of the seduction.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely.
Tell us a little bit.
Yeah.
Tell us now.
I was going to say one other piece that he did, too, that was a real hook for me was he was supporting me in my career, and he was saying, you would make a great therapist, and if you go to graduate school, my corporation will pay for your education, and you can come back and work for me. So that happened even before the sexual violation happened. So I was like, oh, my God, this famous psychiatrist thinks I'm so smart, and he's going to support, so it was like, and I wasn't getting that from my family, who were much more traditional and conservative, and my mom hadn't worked outside the home. So I felt, like the world was opening up to me in terms of this career offer. So that was a huge piece in it. But anyway, long story short, in terms of how I started to get my power back, it went on for quite some time. And by the time I finally ended it with him, I just felt like I was going to go crazy. And at that point, I was in a doctoral program in clinical psychology and had a huge amount of responsibility and had been awarded a fellowship in behavioral medicine, and part of me was so excited, and the other part of me, I was so not functioning well. That's all I had was school. I wasn't making friends, and I ended it with him, and then soon thereafter started having panic attacks and just felt like I was going to die with the secret. Like I couldn't tell anybody. I didn't want him to lose his license, and so I attempted suicide twice. And the second time, here I am in this doctoral program in clinical psychology. I mean, the whole thing was mind-bending, hence the allusion to Hades, right? Underworld experience. And but it was when I wound up after the second attempt, I was transferred to a world-class psychiatric hospital, Shepherd Pratt, in Baltimore. And it was at probably my second treatment team meeting. They sat down with me, and the head of the hospital said, we really feel like you need to take action against him, and if you won't, we will. And he actually handed me the card of an attorney. Now, if he hadn't done that, or if they hadn't supported me in really, finding my voice and taking action, I don't know that I would have. So in that way, I was fortunate, but I was also unfortunate because here I was, I blew up my life, and I was in this hospital for 6 months. And, having people in the profession listen to what I had everybody was just horrified. And so anyway, I contacted the attorneys. They came and took my deposition while I was in the hospital. And then I proceeded to go through 2 court battles of, still very fragile and quite sickly. And it took a long time before I was even properly diagnosed as having candidiasis and all these immune system issues. So it was really it was a one day at a time journey of one step at a time. I have nothing to lose. I have nothing else to lose now. I might as well follow these doctors. Their doctor's orders, which of course was kind of hard for me to follow doctor's orders after what had happened. But it really was like, at least it was a goal. I can talk to these people. I can see what they say, and it was front page, in the newspaper for a couple of different times for a week. And then I took him to the ethics committee, and then after that I found out he did it again. It was through a series of connections. I found out he did it again, and he was still with this next patient. And at that time I got invited to testify before the Maryland General Assembly. They were looking at creating a task force to look at this issue in the state of Maryland. There were so many stories coming out in the early 90s. And so I testified, and then soon thereafter, I get a call from CBS News as I was moving to Santa Fe saying, we hear you have an interesting story. Will you tell it to us? So then I would never have done that if I hadn't found out he did it again. So in some ways that helped me to find out he did it again, to take some of the onus. I was still beating myself up for it. But then to hear that he was doing it again, he had learned nothing, and I had put all of my energy into getting well, I was like, I need to speak out more. So, yeah, it was on the national news, CBS News, 48 Hours, Dan Rather. It was mind-bending. I mean, I would never have imagined walking into the doctor's office at age 21, I would all of a sudden be on this show talking about it. So, so it took a long time, though, to be really ready to write the book, and I feel very proud of it now. And doing art was really important. I'm an art therapist. That was a very important turning point for me to have the images speak my truth, because I was so mentally confused, and I think that's what happens a lot with partners, right? The gaslighting. You don't know what's real. You've lost track of your insight or your instincts. So art making was enormously important for me in tuning into my own self and my own wisdom.
I absolutely want our listening audience to know that I'm talking with Carrie. Is it Ishee?
Carrie Ishee.
How do you say your last name? Yeah.
Yeah,
and
Carrie
you
Ishee.
can see her artwork. Her artwork is on her website. That's www.carrieishee.com, and that is CarrieIshee.com. And you do, Carrie, you have some beautiful, beautiful work. And as I was looking at it, first of all, it's very creative. It's very light. It's very joyful. I don't know if you do any dark work, but I sure didn't see any on your website. And I thought to myself, everything you've been through has absolutely made you the person you are today. And you know that I train for APSATs. I'm on the board of APSATs. And what I believe is that you really got to that post-traumatic growth. You used something that was horrendous that actually caused you to try to suicide twice, and you came out of it, and you grew, and you advocated, and you've made it a purpose and a passion for you, and you're making a difference all over the world.
Well, thank you. One of the most wonderful bits of feedback I got was I have a therapist friend, who gave my book to a client of hers who had suffered this, and she hadn't been able to read for 2 years, which, of course, many trauma survivors can't, right? It's like your frontal lobes go offline. Right. And she said it was the first time she could sit and read in 2 years, and she read the book overnight. She was so riveted, and she was so empowered by just hearing someone else having gone through this, and what I was able to pull in. And I had a lot of gifts along the way and supportive people. And but that was some of the highest praise, really, to hear that, because it was like, why I wrote it really is when I was in the hospital and I'd lost everything. I'd lost my doctorate. I was going for this doctorate. I was doing well. I had lost my friends. Was alienated from my family. I'd lost my health. And it was like I was so hungry for reading firsthand stories of people that overcame dark journeys. And I was so hungry for it, and read voraciously during those years. So I really, wrote the book for those young people, those young women, or even older middle-aged women, right, that have gone through something so horrendous. So, the important part of my healing.
You talk in your book about art being so important in your healing, as well as obviously having written the book. And I was wondering, that art that you did broke through your denial and it helped you to reclaim your truth. And do you have any excerpts from the book that you might be able to read us now, so that our listening audience can understand how art did that for you?
Sure. Okay. How much time do I have? This is probably a page and a half. Is that too long? Because I can just maybe read a couple paragraphs. What do you think?
I think you can read as much as you want. We have 20 minutes, so you are good to go.
Oh, perfect. Okay, perfect. Okay, so I'll just locate you where I am in the book here. I had gone to my first art therapy group maybe 2 weeks into my stay at the hospital. And so I'll just jump in here. So something unfamiliar quivered inside of me. It took me a few seconds to recognize that it was a feeling of happiness. I thought back to the zany sense of humor I'd had in my teens and how my friends and I would laugh joyously at the absurdities of life. Was it coming back? I can tell you're creative and very resourceful, Audrey, the art therapist continued. Sitting there in our art review session, I began to see where my creativity and resourcefulness, my strengths, had helped me to survive a severe depression and a poisonous relationship with my psychiatrist. It was a damned revelation. I sat up straighter. That night, I lay awake in bed with the door open, listening to the night staff whisper in the halls. I couldn't stop thinking about the creative energy from another realm that had poured into me in art class. I'm getting emotional. Oh boy, it's like I can remember it. She or it
I bet.
had wanted to. She or it had wanted to reach out, part of me again. This connection to my higher self felt more real and important than the suicide attempts, psychiatric commitments, lawsuits, or despicable shrinks. Through my bedroom window, I noticed that the moon was brighter than usual. Maybe there was hope for me. Mystic and psychiatrist Carl Jung said the psyche speaks to us through symbols rather than words. Here I'd verbally rehashed my ordeal 100 times over, but never once had I given myself credit for surviving it. The drawing helped me do that. I couldn't wait to go back to the studio. If I had my way, I'd be there every day, every hour, painting away all the remnants of my madness. I wanted to go as often as possible so I could expel every last drop of angst. I wanted to be done with all the mud, the monsters, the ugliness and traumas, and I was eager to put them down where they belonged, on paper or canvas, releasing them from my mind and heart. After painting and sketching for weeks, I continued to unearth more and more positive aspects of myself which I could nurture and trust. One day in art therapy, I felt extremely lighthearted and found it easier than usual to draw. I grabbed some colored chalk and made a quick, simple drawing of abstract shapes on red paper. I tacked it on the board and headed back to my seat. "Holy shit," said Richard, a wonderful gay man recovering from the heartbreak of losing his lover. He stared, transfixed. "My God, Carrie," another voice rang out. Others in the room gasped. Someone whispered, "Jesus, Carrie." I spun around and took in the image from a distance. I froze. I hadn't really seen it before. Dozens of jagged, penis-shaped parts were pointing inward from all directions, stabbing at a void in the center. Dark shades of red, blue, and black pulsated with pain. A wave of nausea washed over me as I realized that this drawing of mine was telling a story, repeated psychic rape. Audrey addressed the shock in the room. "Do you want to tell us about your image, Carrie?" I answered in an unnatural monotone. I guess I was abused by my shrink. Those who were still working popped up their heads from their unfinished pieces. For a few seconds, we sat there examining what had sprung out of me. All were quiet. I fled the studio and practically ran back to my room, not caring that I was being followed closely by a staff member. I closed the door. I felt as if a dam built of numbness, rationalization, and denial had been holding back my grief, but now it crumbled irrevocably. A flood of sorrow and betrayal surged forth, drowning me. My entire body heaved with deep, urgent sobs. The door flew open and a nurse reminded me I wasn't allowed to shut it and be alone. I collapsed on the floor behind the bed in an effort to gain some privacy. The flood washed away my self-blame, my misconceptions that I had been emotionally and spiritually violated and psychically shattered, abused by a man I trusted, the doctor my parents had paid to heal me, a mentor with whom I had shared my deepest spiritual yearnings and dreams of a beautiful life, a person I believed to be a father figure, a healer, my closest friend. I couldn't condone Tony's behavior any longer. It had almost killed me. My body convulsed and I cried myself to sleep. So that was the breakthrough image that I completely created unconsciously in a very jovial state and put it up there. And it was like all the denial, because at that point I was still, even after they said, "We think you should take him to court," I was still holding on to that I was at fault. If I hadn't been so fucked up, this never would have happened. That's how much I had internalized the shame and you know, his manipulations, right, to be the one at fault here.
Right.
And so that image, I mean, that just broke through. And from then I really started working. I started healing, and I called the attorneys and I started telling my story. Yeah.
Well, and so let me ask you, and also remind my listening audience that I'm talking with Carrie Ishee, and she wrote Seduced into Darkness, Transcending My Psychiatrist Sexual Abuse. And the interesting thing is that Carrie is an APSATS counselor. Are you a counselor or a coach?
I'm a clinical counselor, art therapist, and life coach. I'm all three. But I'm trained as an APSATS therapist. Yeah.
So, you know, what I know about APSATS then is you can help people all over the world, either with your coaching or within your own state, following the guidelines and state lines. Did you ever have any confrontation with him after court?
No, I didn't. I did not.
Okay.
And I certainly had many fantasies about showing up at his office and sitting down and confronting him, but I never did. I just didn't want to get I didn't want to get sucked back in and, you know, be manipulated and be compassionate for him, because I actually did have compassion for him. That's the ultimate thing that was exploited, was my compassion. Even more than my sexuality or my spirit, my compassion was exploited by this man, where I started taking care of him basically in the relationship. So,
and oftentimes that's the cycle, isn't it, Carrie? That you end up having so much compassion that it is that mixed bag of taking care of, and also knowing in your intuition that what he's doing is wrong. And so you were smart enough not to go back and get sucked back in and, you know, violate your own sense of intuition.
Yes.
So let me ask
we
you
believe he's deceased now. Yeah.
So let me ask you, because we have a listening audience that includes sex addicts in recovery. That's why they're listening to the show, and partners who love their addicts and they want to understand them better. And then we have clinicians and coaches that listen because they always learn something from my guests. The listeners are amazed at how much information they get on a regular basis. So I want to ask you, do you have any tips for our listeners who, you know, maybe on their own journey to healing, and they want to shift out of that victimization and move into empowerment so that they can do something totally different but very similar in nature to what you've accomplished?
Great question. I would say that certainly accessing your creativity in every way possible. It doesn't have to be just through art making. It could be from singing. It could be from the way you decorate your home. It could be journaling every morning. It's expressive, like being able to express what is inside of you so you can get past the pain into more episodes of connection with beauty or with soul. So I think not just sitting there quietly holding stuff in, but expressing and moving things out. And then I think a spiritual journey, a spiritual perspective about, you know, what am I going to do with this? How am I going to give this meaning? A book that I read in the hospital, a very famous book, Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, who talks of his experience in Auschwitz and losing his family, and he went on to develop logotherapy, which is the therapy of meaning. That book was riveting for me because I thought if he could get through that and come to the States and start this school looking at what men really want more than anything is not like what Freud said, sex and libido and lust, but wants meaning. If he could do that after what he went through, there's a path for me. So I think finding your mentors, finding those beacons of light that make you go, oh, he did it or she did it, I can do it. And it's a one day at a time thing, and no one's going to do it for you. You have to choose every day. And I think you've got to find ways to fill yourself up, no matter what's going on with your partner. Obviously, couples work and developing intimacy and the healing that can happen from doing this work individually can fortify couples enormously, even couples that have had betrayals. But I think ultimately, the partnerships mend to the degree to which people are willing to also do their really own individual soul work and never stop. It's ongoing, and it's exciting.
Yes. Well, you are absolutely an inspiration because you really did fall into that hole of darkness and you pulled yourself up and out. And, it did pull you out of that victimization state and you became empowered. And truly, Patrick Carnes says this, the sex addict guru. He says, when you've been through terrible trauma and suffering, a transformation occurs. And the ultimate goal is to turn it around and give back in some way. And between your art, your writing, and what you do it different ways. So I just want to thank you, because obviously you're making a real difference in the world. And if people want to get a hold of you, now I mentioned your website again is www.Carrie, Ishee.com, and they can email you at Carrie@CarrieIshee.com if they have a question, or maybe they'd like you to speak for one of their organizations. And you have your book trailer is on YouTube, so tell us how they can find you there.
Yeah, you can go to YouTube, Seduced into Darkness, and it says book trailer. And there's also, you can go to the Zoom book launch on Seduced into Darkness, and you see me reading. You have a couple of professionals introducing me and the topic, and then me reading from the book as well. So those are two other places to locate information about me and my story. And I would absolutely love to speak to, I'm really passionate about supporting mental health providers. Now being on the other side of it, I'm a provider now, and like how much we have to work on our own wellness. It's part of why I also became a coach, is that I love the coaching perspective about really going for what you want, not just getting over your past, but going for what you want. And I think that's important for all therapists, all mental health practitioners, medical practitioners, anybody in the helping field, to be constantly in a process of developing their lives. So they're beautiful lives, not just caretaking lives. So, please reach out if you're interested, and thank you so much. And, thanks for bearing with me through my tears. I can't get through reading my book without crying some, because it brings me back there, and these were turning points for me. And I'm just excited to be where I am now, and that healing can happen.
Well, you should know, and I know you do, that you never have to apologize for your emotions, certainly not on my show or with me, because emotions are welcomed here. And so I just want to thank you so very much. And I want to say that in some ways I can really appreciate where you were at when COVID happened, because I, too, had released a book the year before in April and was going on a book tour to Italy. They canceled that, as well as many other book tours. And, I just really feel like I'm not regretful at all. I just know that good things come to people that are willing to give to the world. And certainly that's you. And that was my book. And I just love that we're in it together to help people heal. So, Carrie Ishee, thanks again. And come back on the show and let us know what you're doing.
Sounds great. Thanks, Carol. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. Have a great week.
Okay, you too. Bye.
Yes, so that was Carrie Ishee, and obviously you've got to check out her art. Very expressive, very beautiful. And, I'm a big believer that when you create, it heals the brain. And she was healing all over the place. And I can't imagine what it would be like to be interviewed on national TV. Wow. Well, actually, I was interviewed on national TV, but I didn't even know it at the time. I thought I was going local, and they played me on national, and I just went, Dateline? I was on Dateline? So Google me and see if you can find out when, where, and how that occurred. We'll talk more about that next week. Listen, we have to go. But as they say at the end of every show, there will only be one of you at all times. Fearlessly have the courage to be yourself, and make sure you make it a good week, and have fun and create and heal that brain, would you? We'll see you next week for more Sex Health with Carol, the Coach.